Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from DeltaCX.com. We're a full service CX and UX consultancy. Check us out if you have spare time. And welcome to the second edition today of Office Hours Ask Me Anything. I changed my lighting setup. Is this better or worse? Anybody want to chime in? I'm just going to keep messing with this. So thanks for your patience with my weird lighting setup and other fun stuff like raccoon eyes. And while we're talking about fun stuff that we want to point out, let me press this button and thank all of the people who are donating to our YouTube channel through YouTube's memberships program. Thanks to all of the low ego action heroes at all levels who are donating financially. It's totally optional, but always appreciated. I reinvested in the show and into delicious chocolate chips. So there we go. Thank you. Kayleen says the lighting is scary. Okay, I'll have to work on that. Abby says hi there. Hi, Abby. Yeah, sorry, Kayleen. Maybe the lighting isn't scary and I'm scary. I think we'll have to figure this out. But the problem was my lighting was making me look really raccoony-eyed, and I thought maybe I'd bring it closer. Maybe now it's too close. I don't know. Someone help me with this. It's a one-woman show, everybody. There's only so good this gets. But it gets better today because we have a special guest joining us for Office Hours Ask Me Anything. So it's Office Hours Ask Us Anything. And if you'd like to send in a question, you can send it to the chat room or anonymously at deltacx.link/ask. We already have a few questions that have come in, so we're going to get started with those as soon as we meet our guest. Hello, Matthew. Please spell your name and tell everybody all about you.
Hey, everybody. How you doing? My name is Matthew Voshell, M-A-T-T-H-E-W. Voshell, my last name too. V as in Victor, O-S-H-E-L-L. It's German, actually, Bavarian. So I have been I know, right? I've been a product designer for about 8 years. Actually, prior to that, I had a career in cybersecurity, so I'm a career pivoter, as it were. I've spent the last 8 years creating enterprise applications for companies like Budweiser, excuse me, all the way through to large financial institutions like Citibank. I also produce a podcast called Discovering Design, in which I feature other product designers who came from various different non-technical backgrounds and thus became product designers at companies that you probably interact with today. Currently, I'm about to actually start as a product designer at Hemley and getting into real estate and smaller landlords as such to try to help them and support them and turn their business into something that could be fruitful and grow into the future. Excited to be here. Thank you so much, Debbie.
Yes, well, we like to meet new people and see what they think. And congrats on the new job. So, all right, here we go. So let's also say hi to Festus, Jamila, who's joining us for the second time today. Can't keep you away. And Janice. Hi, Janice. Hope there's less fighting going on in your house over books, which is a reference to last week's show. Okay, so let's take or was it yesterday? Okay, so let's take a look at our first question. We're going to start with the questions that came in ahead of time, so I really do save these. Hi, Anna. So our first question is it difficult to find jobs even once you have a few years of experience in UX? What's been your experience, Matthew?
Yeah, as someone who just came to the end of that kind of process, right? That's really a prescient question to ask. And even more today, so because there are more people entering the field, I think, than ever, or that are interested in joining the field. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Those are my prints, by the way. So if you're interested, we can talk about that later and where I took those photos. But yeah, there's more access. There's more people joining the field, which means there's more access. Plus, remote has so much opened the market to companies to access talent that normally would have to be physically, within a certain radius of them. So it's just generally more competitive in general. And then, so I think those two things kind of force you to have to, up your game. And so regardless if you're, like me and you've been in this game for a while or somebody getting in, it's just competitive. It's just competitive. And you just got to try to find ways to stand out and be unique, I think.
All right. Well, thank you, and I'm glad you did find that job. So hopefully, you'll like something about it. My answer would be that I think the hardest job to find is still the first one. I think it does get better after the first one, but there's a couple of things that are going to happen once you've been working in UX a little bit. Number one, like Matthew said, it is definitely more competitive now that the world has opened up to the world, and you can possibly be hired anywhere. Now you're competing against people in regions you may not have thought about. And also, I think your standards will be raised. I don't know. Did you find that, Matthew? You're not going to say yes to necessarily the first offer, or yes to necessarily to everybody. You might be a little bit pickier as you go. Did you find you were pickier this time around, or were you in a not picky type of mood?
I I don't know that I would use the vernacular picky. Certainly, I think having standards is a harsh way to put it. I think, but certainly that's it, right? Understanding and prioritizing, and I'm lucky to be fortunate enough. I live with my partner, so I have help. I'm lucky enough to be so in that position, so I could kind of hold out and be like, no, I want to go to a place where our ethics match, what we care about matches. We both value different aspects, but then also the people and I are very, very aligned on the mission of what the company is doing. And I hate to bring this up, but the analogous to trying to find a job and romantic dating is very similar, right? You're just trying to figure out, and like you're both kind of evaluating each other at the same. Oh, nice, the hearts. You're both evaluating each other at the same time, right? So I don't kind of approach that any differently, right? So it's just about figuring out, is there a company that works best for you, and do you work best for that company? And then hopefully you find that match. And sometimes, yeah, to your point, right, that first job, it could take 6 months, right? Other times it's you're lucky enough that you get an internship, but there's nothing really. It's I feel like it's completely random in that sense.
Great, thanks for that. And of course, if anybody has questions, send them in. We still have a few more to answer. And then, oops, I'm pressing all the wrong buttons this morning or this evening. What time is it? All right, please hold. The fun of the live
Yeah,
show.
we're all the
Let's
way.
see.
We are literally couldn't be more. It is 10 o'clock in the morning here and 7 o'clock at night you. So we are literally opposite sides of the world. So that's fun.
Yeah, we're far apart but close in spirit. Okay, so we've
Very
got
much.
a question here, and it goes a little like this. I have learned that moderated studies focus on why, and unmoderated studies focus on what. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I'm going to keep reading the question. I have
Yeah.
also watched episode 123 to understand more about the two studies. Okay, that's obviously a previous episode on this channel. Thank you for watching. But when I was learning about unmoderated studies in detail, I found that in the design of tasks, open ended questions can be asked as follow up questions to probe user behaviors. It blurs my understanding of the difference between the two types of study. How can moderated studies probe deeper into user behaviors compared to an unmoderated study when an unmoderated study can involve probing the why? Whoa, okay, that was a little twisty turny, but let's just boil
It
that
was a little
down
walk.
to, hey, Matthew, moderated versus unmoderated studies. What do you, I don't know if you, how much you tend to do research, but where would you say these are better or worse choices? Or again, I forgot to tell you earlier, you can always pass on a question if you feel it's outside of your realm.
No, no, and for clarification, so I do describe myself as a quote unquote full stack ethnographic product designer. So I'm
Cool.
comfortable doing everything from that that user study stuff all the way through to working with engineers, given I have an engineering past, just to clear that up. So two things, kind of how I react to this question. First, it feels a bit, and as being also a certified Scrum Master in addition to being a designer, it feels a bit like you're chasing process, and I don't understand what you're ultimately trying to get at here. Like it looks like you're trying to choose a process, but I have no understanding of why or what you're ultimately trying, what's the problem you're trying to solve, right? And so that will kind of dictate what you ultimately choose as far as the method. But that said, I don't. Yeah, to your point, I don't assign like a why and what to each. I think it depends on what you're ultimately trying to understand, right? If I'm trying to understand, okay, we need to build something, we need to understand the average resolution size. Sure, send out a survey. I don't need to know the why. I just need to know the literal data. Versus, okay, we're seeing these users exhibit this behavior in specific regions. No, we need to sit down and have an open-ended discussion to really dig in. And the goal in that sense is just to learn, right? Or to avoid avoid my own assumptions, avoid my own unconscious bias, right? To do those types of aspects. So I don't really, from this question, get a sense of, yes, those are things you could do, but I don't really, it would be helpful to understand why you're trying to do those in the first place.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Yeah, great points there, and certainly agree that it sounds like we're trying to talk about the difference between moderated and unmoderated, but why are we doing any of these things? And so I think that I would have to agree. There isn't too much I can add here other than to say that, yeah, they both have their pros and cons, but if you have time for moderated, you'll often get a lot more insights out of it. You do have the option to ask follow-up why questions and things like that. In an unmoderated, obviously you're not there to talk to people. You can try to put in some sort of why, and people can hopefully type something at the end, but it doesn't necessarily mean you get what you were shooting for. So I wouldn't necessarily say that one is better at why and one is better at what. They're both good for different reasons. And Kayleen says, tell me more about the ethnographic part. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Maybe two things. One, and I just recently added this to my portfolio, but being a child of the 80s, I grew up with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And
Won't you be my neighbor?
specifically, indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the cardigan sweater, I just, anyway. In general, the message of, I think, that show in general is to be accepting of people who are different and not to be fearful, but be curious of that, right? And then also the part where he would show the video of how things were made, right? So I think that kind of all started to build on top of it. But then once I decided to become a designer, I'm like, okay, how can I more refine these? And I was in New York for about 6 years before I came to Seattle. And I audited a course at Pace University around method acting. And then I took a couple of classes at UCB East when it was still open. I think they're closed now. Around improvisation to kind of leverage those methods to basically, to your point, do root cause analysis, get it to the root point of, okay, you take this action, but it's probably going to be 5 layers down here. And I need to be able to improvisationally kind of jump around to finally get to that root cause of why you're taking this particular action so that I can create a design to help you ultimately reach your goal, right? So that's all about what I think about ethnography. And then obviously, empathy and all those kinds of other aspects as well. Compassion.
Hold on, you said empathy. There we go. That's better.
Oh yeah,
And quick
that's right.
and quick hellos to Ian, Favi, Aitan, and Linda. Don't forget to ask your questions, everybody. I think after this question we are caught up. So
Cool.
please send those questions in. You can put them in the chat room, or you can send them anonymously at deltacx.link/ask. Okay, so this one says, I am evaluating a product currently in use by a company's sales team. The product was developed by others during the pandemic, and I am carrying out feedback sessions and usability tests with the sales team or stakeholders. It's a small group, 8, and all were included in the study. My question is, as I move to the iterative stage and look at prototyping for potentially further user testing, are there any issues or implications of reusing the same sales team? In this case, they are the real users. And I did get a follow-up comment from the person who asked this privately, and they said that the internal sales team are the end users here, so recruiting from outside the company didn't really make sense. Thoughts on reusing participants?
Sorry, I have to think about this for a second.
That's okay. Thinking is allowed.
So yeah, that last part, I have a story, not really a fully formed question. Oh, please, yeah, if there's a question in there. Sorry, I'm seeing the comments come up at the bottom.
I know you are seeing the comments. I have them showing there. I know they're very distracting. I don't know what to tell you.
It's okay. Yeah, it's fine. It's my fault. So the first thing, so knowledge isn't really the problem with this case, right? Unconscious bias is, to me, in that sense. So the first kind of tension I have in this scenario is that those persons who are already involved, not to mention their internal people, so they're aware of probably what your day-to-day is doing to some extent. So I would want to go to people who are outside, not because they may or may not know it, but because they're not biased. They're going to tell me, what does it take to do like this job XYZ, right? Without the influence of what I'm already trying to build or what has already been built to date, right? So I think that's the first step, is how do you avoid unconscious bias? Second of all, though, if you're coming in with something that exists, for me, there's always two aspects. One, what's the low hanging fruit, right? To your point, when you did that user testing, was there like things that you could, as a designer, easily address and then hand off to engineering and ship, right? There's usually, some semblance of 5 to 10 items that you can address right away. But then there's a few other items where you got feedback on. We're like, no, like we need to go back, and it was clear that we didn't understand the problem very clearly, and we need to either go back and re-interview everything, from reanalyze the information we have to re-interview people to possibly even talking to people who aren't biased, to make sure that you truly understand that problem. So I think first analyzing, what you've got in front of you, and then taking the appropriate action based on your understanding of the problem at the time, will kind of dictate your actions from going forward from there.
Certainly a much better answer than I previously gave. Thank you for that. I mostly said like, well, not plan A, but you might be stuck if those are your internal users and all the people you have access to. But I appreciate the extra color that you added to that. I'm trying to get Kayleen's question together because YouTube only lets people type, a few characters at a time. So,
Okay.
Kayleen, tell me when you have fully transmitted all the things across. Meanwhile, this is Office Hours Ask Me Anything. You can ask me or Matthew anything you want by typing into the chat, or you can also go to deltacx.link/ask. I'm going to take off my headphones quickly and run around the table and try to fix my lighting. But other than that, and meanwhile, Matthew, you can fill in for a moment and tell people how they can find you and stalk you.
Yeah, sure. I've actually removed myself quite a bit from social media, but I am on LinkedIn. Feel free to follow me on there, or if you'd like to connect, please leave a note. I'm happy to talk. Oh gosh, you can see the seat. But to that question, though, of earlier, I do want to. When I talk to data scientists, they talk a lot about this, of like, there's no such thing as a perfect data set. It's the same thing when you come in, right? There's some sort of design there. You're gonna have to have a plan together. You can't just throw it out and start all over again. That's not typically feasible. And so, having some semblance of being flexible and understanding, it's not always going to be perfect, and how can I get it to a point where it's workable and feasible for me to start addressing and making great experiences, I think is something that every designer should have in their back pocket.
Hey, thanks for filling some time while I deal with technical difficulties. Please stand by. Kayleen is still telling her story, so I'm trying to get it all copied and pasted over. Since everything people type, I end up copying and pasting into the YouTube description. So everything will be archived on YouTube. If anyone's looking for this recording later, you can find it. It'll be in the Office Hours playlist on YouTube. Kayleen is still typing, but I think I'm going to put the start of her story up on the screen, since I bet we will have a lot to talk about. So let me post that up there. And yeah, here we go, Kayleen, and we'll add to it as you keep typing. Okay, so hold on. It's a one-woman show, and there's a lot of copying and pasting. Let's see. And lights falling.
Do you know how many? So do we know how many people are on right now? I can't see.
It only shows me how many people are on YouTube. It doesn't show me how many people are on LinkedIn or other places. But for YouTube, it looks like 13.
Yay. Nice. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, I usually, between all the things, I usually get 20 to 40 people, depending upon the topic. And obviously, many people are still on Easter vacation right now. So I apologize for the timing.
Or Ramadan or Passover.
That's true. That's true. I forgot everything was colliding right now. And S. White is asking a question. Great question. We will ask it after the Kayleen story. All right. So here we go. Kayleen's story says, I'm volunteering for a nonprofit. The nonprofit has teams, each with their own social impact product they're working on building. My team is supposed to create a design system for the entire org, so used by every team. We conducted individual interviews to learn about user pain points. If I were there during planning, I would have chosen observation as the method, but I can't change that. One of our findings from the interviews was that nonprofits aren't being retained. Onboarding is a mess. I would agree, because the GitHub Kanban board we use within our own project is a mess. I'm torn between properly conducting information architecture and observational research and just jumping in and updating the documentation, procedures, and wiki articles. Some of the problems are just really obvious to me. I think there's a question in there somewhere. Hi, Manuel. Matthew, given all of that, any advice for good friend of the show, Kayleen?
Well, one, I certainly can empathize with the feeling of that feeling, right? Just in general. Yeah. I certainly can empathize with wanting to do that. But then I think you stop for a second and think like, okay, that's great, but how does that scale? Right. And how is that an approach that is necessarily inclusive and doesn't just put everything on your shoulders? Because then something happens to you, right? Then everything will just fall apart. And that's just not that's not feasible. That's not long. That's something long term. Volunteers aren't being retained. Oh, thank you. Got it. So that can certainly be it. Certainly things to be front. It sounds like we could talk to individual user papers. I thought you were going to go the design system route, but I guess it seems like you're trying to coalesce and understand what the different needs are across those different. Or was the word used branding? Social impact product. They all have a social impact product that I'm assuming it's going to have its own little individual things. I believe if she can text in that report comment, that'd be
Kayleen's
great.
watching
I'm understanding
live.
that
So,
correctly.
Kayleen, can you give us I guess the question is,
Is it the design system or is it
right. I was
the
going to say,
product
what
itself?
are you allowed to work on right now? Do you have to make a design system no matter how the research went, no matter what's going on the Kanban board?
Right,
And if
right.
you were to change the Kanban board or do something else, does it actually change or affect the project, or is the project just off and running towards design system land no matter what? So now we have to wait for Kayleen
Right.
to write that. YouTube is usually about 20 to 30 seconds behind us. So maybe we can fill
Okay.
in with any other thoughts we have while we wait for Kayleen.
Please, by all means, do you have any?
Yeah. I think, well, there's a lot going on with design systems. So a design system has to be created. It has to be tested. We have to keep, Solomon, you've got, that's your next. Okay, we'll ask Solomon's question after S. White's question. Solomon, you'll be on the list. Your question will be added later. Kayleen, the design system has to be tested. We have to make sure it's accessibility friendly and meets all accessibility standards. We have to make sure that we've captured branding. We have to make sure that the engineering teams are ready for it. We have to make sure people understand how to contribute to it or request changes to it. A design system is a really, really huge project. And I think the question is, based on your volunteer status with this group, are you allowed to try to clean up the Kanban board? Does someone else own the Kanban board? Is that an engineering lead or an agile coach? Like, are you stepping on someone's toes accidentally or on purpose? And Roshan's got questions. We will add you to the bottom of the list. Thank you, Roshan. Thanks for staying up late with us today. That's my first thought. My first thought is, look, I know Kayleen is smart and she can fix anything that she's allowed to fix, but is she allowed to fix this? Can she say, sure, we're all here to build a design system, but I'm going to reorganize our Kanban boards and try to improve our ways of working? I would normally think that takes authority for someone to say, yes, Kayleen, please do that. Matthew, I know I'm a little bit off on a tangent. What are your thoughts on some of this?
No. You saying that actually does is jotting down some notes to that earlier point. I think, and kind of also what I was saying. by you kind of just doing it, you're also skirting the opportunity for that person to your point, if they own that board, then they should be held accountable to do that. If they're not held accountable, then the team won't mature and kind of grow in that sense. Second, is that Don floating? Nice.
That's Don Norman.
Yeah, floating around. Yeah, and then to my point earlier, scale, right? Like the question I'm always asking myself is like, yes, you could do this, but what happens if it's like 10 projects? There's only so much time in the day, and that's just not, I think, humanly feasible for a work-life balance. And then the last part is like, kind of to what you were talking about, like, yes, you can mess around with the Kanban board, but what is the actual impact on the end problem you're having, right? Is the user pain point of implementing the design system and its applicability to the problems those particular products are solving, or are you trying to just figure out a way to get them to use the design system, period, and you're trying to figure out like so in that sense the problem could kind of drive you to different directions with respect to responding to this question, as far as I'm concerned. To the latter, though, if that is the case, I did have experience of that when I was running a design team in EY, and we had a couple different teams across different business verticals. That yes, we wanted to share things, and like you said, address accessibility at scale, those things. But problems I was solving in finance might be different than tax slightly. So we almost had like these sub design systems in Figma. So it was the main system, and then we would branch and then branch again, and then they would feed back up. So there are certainly ways operationally within Figma to support those types of product splits like that, if that was the
And
case.
yeah, and thanks for that. And to the whole Kanban board thing, I think my question would be, in addition to the work you're doing for this group, do you want to become kind of the project manager? Because hypothetically, I think the
Yeah.
project manager should be grooming or creating or cleaning up the Kanban board. If there is a project manager, I know you said you've been given permission, but is that in coordination with a project manager? Hi, Elvina. Or are you becoming the project manager? And if you're becoming the project manager, are you prepared to become the project manager and try to keep, bless you, honey, and try to keep people on track and sharing the home office and try to keep
Yeah.
people and the project more on track? And if you try to tell people how to do research and all this stuff, will that go well? Or, it's I just want to make sure you're within the boundaries of what you've been given authority to do. Otherwise, it sounds like, if you have a personality like mine, it accidentally becomes the Debbie show. Debbie is running the Kanban board, and Debbie's telling people what to work on, and Debbie doesn't like the way research was done, and now it's the Debbie show. It's just a couple of warnings there. But since we've got a few other questions in, I'm going to shift over. But Kayleen, if you have a follow-up question, please do type it up and send it in, and we will jump on your follow-up question. Next, we had a question from the mysterious S. White. And S. White says, hello. What would you say are the top 5 issues surfaced during user tests? I mean, don't feel held to 5, Matthew, but just in general.
I mean, this is impossible to answer as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this is completely subjective and based on so many different variables: the talent of the team, the how much empathy do you have with the user problem. I need my gold. I said
Oh, sorry. I was
Sorry.
looking at Kayleen's response. Sorry, you said empathy. Go ahead.
Yeah. What is the subject you're trying to solve for? How complicated is that subject? I mean, there's that's an incredibly generic but impossible question to answer as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's a little bit tough. I mean, to me, I feel like the answer is the top 5 issues surfaced during user tests are the 5 issues you find. They really could be anything.
Yeah.
They could be accessibility. They could be content. They could be navigation. They could be process flow or information architecture. They could be performance, if it's an existing product. There's so many things. So I don't think we can easily say, like, hey, here's the top things to look out for. I always like to say, look
Yeah.
out for the four horsemen of bad UX: frustration, confusion, disappointment, and distraction. But, that doesn't necessarily, tell you like top five things. It's really going to be up to you and the particular thing you're testing or researching for what you find. Sorry, S. White. I hope that helps you out there in some way or another. Let's jump over
That was
to
no worries.
Solomon's question because, oh, Solomon, we love you. What, is lean UX not working out for you? Hey, Larry Marine is here. He says, number one, no design is ever perfect. No matter how foolproof you try to make it, Mother Nature comes up with a better fool.
Mm.
There you go. Okay, so Solomon asks, you guys made some good points I'm still digesting. Okay, and Prince will get your question on the list. This is how it works, Matthew. It's just a never-ending flow. All right.
Please. Hang on.
Here we go. Multitasking. Solomon says, working at a job for less than a year before going to another one, is this still considered a stain on a designer's resume? What do you say, Matthew?
All right. There is no and I'm in the United States, so apologies for the rest
So
of the
is
world. But in the
Solomon.
United States, okay, great. Yeah. So there's no constitutional amendment that says that you must keep your LinkedIn exactly accurate. And you're like, no, it's the internet. You present to the world what you want them to see, right? So if there's a break in there, or you weren't at a job for very long, or you didn't feel like you had an impact, don't add it. Like then if there's a break in there, and you work for a company that cares about that break, or you don't really want to talk about that you work there and they care about that, then maybe that's not a right fit for you, or you could go somewhere else and they won't care, and you just present the work that you feel you're most proud of, and you go and get another job. I think, especially with how in demand and even more in demand designers are going to be this day, it's more like, can you do the job? Like, right. So and whether or not you left there after a year, maybe it just wasn't a right fit for you. That happens. So you move on and you just treat it professionally.
Yeah, great point. And just to add to that, I remember I worked with a woman at a company, and the day before her 3-month probation was over, they fired her. And I don't
Hmm.
blame them. She was not that good. But when I looked at her LinkedIn later, that job was never there. So, like Matthew said, that was just a job she didn't want to talk about. She didn't want to be asked about it. She didn't want to speak about it. So, it's just not on her LinkedIn. She'd rather have a 3-month gap than that. So, Solomon, it really depends when you say less than a year, how long it is, and whether you think having a gap on the resume, which you might be asked to explain, is better or worse than saying the job thing. Now, I tend to put all my jobs on my LinkedIn or resume, even if I'm there short periods of time. And if I do get asked about that, even though I think it's becoming more and more common, especially because I tend to do contracts, but if I do get asked about that, my answer usually sounds something like this. And it's honest, but it's a little bit rehearsed. And usually I say, I was really excited about that job when I started there, but once I was there a couple of months, some things unfolded, and unfortunately I found that it really wasn't the right fit. And rather than continue to stay in something that wasn't the right fit, I chose to move on. And usually that's enough of a hint to the people you're talking to, where they've been through that themselves. They hear what you're saying, they hear what you're not saying, and it's kind of a pleasant and neutral way of saying, I ended up in a shitstorm and I decided to leave. And so I think that there's a
Yeah.
pleasant and neutral way to say, hey, this job seemed so great when I joined, but then unfortunately, some months into it, it clearly wasn't a fit. So that's what I would say. But Solomon, I don't hold short jobs against anybody, especially as a contractor myself. I know technically this was a full-time job for you, but I wouldn't hold that against you. And I think you just have to be ready with a polite, pleasant, neutral answer. If you're in an interview and they say, gee, you've only been there, I'm trying to remember when you got the job, but I can't remember everything about everybody in the community. I want to say you've been there 7 or 8 months. But I feel like you started there in October, but anyway, I think, if someone says, hey, you were only there 8 months, why are you leaving? And you just have to come up with something pleasant and neutral that doesn't sound accusatory or assholey or things like that.
Yeah, to that point, don't be rude, but be honest. If you're just honest up front with people, most of the time you'll be rewarded for that, right? And it happens, right? Like you see this all the time happen in professional sports, right? Like for those who do watch sports, OBJ wasn't doing great in Cleveland, goes to LA, wins a Super Bowl, right? Like sometimes some cultures just are not a fit. It's not anyone's fault. It is what it is.
Yeah, and Solomon, I would say you're there almost a year if you started in July, and by the time you're interviewing, it's going to be 10 months ish. I really don't think this is the albatross that you imagine it to be. I really think that this is okay.
Oh, there's a
What?
phrase we haven't heard in a while. The albatross around your neck, I believe is the phrase, right? Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Let's see. Okay, let me see what question is next because now they're coming in and some of them are long, 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 and I'm getting lost. Um, all right, let's see. Here's the next one. Ethnographic study. Oh, good. You'll be able to answer this, and I will sort out my questions. All right, let's take a look at this one.
Fair enough.
Sorry about my sniffles, everybody. It's turning into spring allergy season where I live. All right, so this says, how important is cultural understanding in an ethnographic study? Oh, this reminds me of the TV commercial. Is a cat's urinary tract health important? Only if you want to have a cat. How important is cultural understanding in an ethnographic study? For example, can someone who hasn't lived in a particular can someone who hasn't lived in a particular culture be effective as a researcher? In my early career, I once did usability study with US users, and I failed miserably because of my lack of understanding of the culture and nuances. Okay, sounds like someone from outside of the US. Matthew, thoughts on this multi-pronged question?
Yeah. So, multiple layers here. So first, I'll attack one at a time. So, how important is cultural understanding for an ethnographic? It's incredibly important. I believe Facebook and their issues in was it the Philippines? I'm so sorry, I forget the country exactly, but there was an issue there where Facebook was being overrun and used in a way that I think Facebook wasn't originally expecting them to, and it got in a way all the way through to that to specific words that may be okay in one country and not okay in another, right? It kind of can run the gamut as far as that's concerned. Um, I have a little bit of conflict with the usability study. Like a usability study and an ethnographic really research, very different things, right? Ethnographic research, you're looking to just learn. You're looking to understand the meta person, right, in that way. But to your point around cultural understanding and whether the person has been living there, that's why you talk to multiple people. So at my current job, right, where we're helping landowners or landlords or owners of real estate, right? But my first question was like, great, but let's make a product that works for landlords in Detroit. Let's make it for Birmingham, Alabama. Let's go to New York. Let's go to Seattle. Let's go to Florida. It's just for the U.S. for now, right? But you get the idea, right? Of even if you are talking to one person that's only been there for a couple of years, make sure that you talk to another two people, at least three, so that you're avoiding unconscious bias, to make sure that you kind of are able to build a picture for yourself in that way. So I wouldn't put too much pressure on that. Just make sure you're talking to at least three people in a particular culture or area or region. And I think you'll be able to paint a very good picture and avoid those biases.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm not even going to go there. Ethnographic is not my specialty. I don't have that background, but just a reminder to everybody to please subscribe to the channel. If you enjoy shows like this, won't you please tell 3 friends? I bet you have 3 friends who work in UX or wish they could work in UX, and they want to know more about the Delta CX channel, even though they don't know they want to know more about it. So please tell everybody about the Delta CX channel, because unfortunately, YouTube is not spreading the word on our behalf. Okay, so let's move on to our next question.
Thanks for that question, by the way. That was helpful.
Yeah, they're all good today, luckily. All right, next. As a UX researcher, how do I integrate into a dev sprint, even though my work happens 1 to 2 sprints ahead of dev, especially in Jira or DevOps? I feel confused about whether or not I should integrate or have my own track. Ooh, I've got opinions here. Matthew.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, don't let the tool dictate how you work. It should be the other way around, first and foremost, as a high level point. As a lower level point, yeah, look up something called, this is what I actually do. It's called a product relay. Adam Perilous posted an article. I think it might still be on Medium. He like trademarked it apparently too. But basically, it's how does he describe it? I think it's a design sprint, and then it double loops into an agile development sprint. But the kind of interesting point of that is that your loop, yes, your loop should be ahead in a way, like quote unquote, right? But as you're constantly learning and going through those loops, you're not really handing off anything to design. I like the other part is like, why is research directly interacting with development in this question? That's the other part that kind of is a little confusing to me, because in my experience, if you're a UX researcher, you should be interacting directly with the designers, right? And helping them build empathy, helping them understand the problem, helping them understand the user base, and all those kinds of aspects, so that they can create designs that are hopefully feasible. And then they hand it to engineering. So I'm kind of a little also confused about why you're even having much of an interaction with development, other than maybe including them when you are doing your debriefs around, building empathy for the entire pod and not just for the developers. But that's something that should be ongoing, right? That's not necessarily like, oh, I need to be in the sprint. Like, you should be having once a week meetings, like, here's the latest things that I learned. Here's what I know. Here are assumptions that we had that actually I just disproved because of this new thing that I learned, right? That should be almost like, it's completely, maybe that's what you mean by track. You're on your own independent loop that's just constantly feeding the entire pod and constantly building empathy.
Yeah. Okay, so let me add to that. And 2 quick things. Number one, we've got about 20 minutes left. So if anybody has questions, please do send them in. We'll do our best to get to all questions today. Number two, Kayleen said, my new lighting is scary. And I'd like to know if people think my new lighting is scary, or what your opinion of it is. All opinions are welcome. It might be scary. I apologize. When you watch this one back, just cover one eye so you're just looking at Matthew. So to answer this question, I've got a lot of content on this. Gosh, you can watch episode 116. Everybody knows when I say 116, you drink. You can also look for in the Delta CX conference sessions playlist for my talk called Improving Agility by Using Customers' Definitions of Quality and Done. But ultimately, what I tend to recommend is, if as a researcher you're under pressure to estimate your time in sprints and with the dev team, then yeah, you are like 6 sprints ahead, because there's research and then they still have to do design and all the design testing and iterations. So you have to be like freaking 6 sprints ahead. Now at that point, the question is, why are you're not, you're like sprint -4. So, it doesn't even make sense. So I think that I always recommend Tri-Track Agile, and I think that Tri-Track Agile is the way to go, and it does put you on a separate stream of work, and it means you're not necessarily, I'm turning down the lights. People said too bright, a little scary. Let's see, how's this? Now it's too dark. Now it's too dark, and I have raccoon eyes again. Oh my God. The curse of the high cheekbones and slight raccoon eyes. So thanks everybody. Too bright. All right, I'm gonna keep working on this. Can y'all just fly over here and help me with my lighting? So I would say talk about Tri-Track Agile, because Tri-Track Agile says, look, research is on one stream of work. Design, strategy and design and product road mapping are on the next stream, because it is influenced and by research and research informed. And then all of engineering and agile, Kanban, Jira, whatever they want to do is on their own stream of work. And we don't have to get involved in that, but we do have to do planning well enough and collaboratively, so that everybody knows when to expect UX research outputs, outcomes, out whatevers, and documents. Everybody knows when to expect designs and iterations and things like that. So I would still say if you have to measure in sprints, you are 2 zillion sprints ahead. And if you don't have to measure in sprints, look at try, track, agile. That way engineering can work the way engineering wants, and research and design and product can work in a non-sprinty world. That would be my suggestion. And Kayleen is still writing, I'm focused on our internal team's board. My question is, I feel weird changing things without information architecture or UX research, but part of me feels like I've observed enough with my own team to make these changes. If you're the project manager, then just do some project managing.
Yeah, but then the other flip side of that is you're the one making the changes, so you're leaning into your own unconscious biases, and so you're not doing it objectively with other people's input. So that would be my other concern about that.
And Larry says, agree with Matt and Debbie. UX research, design, and refinement occur at different times, and only refinement can fit into the development sprints. Kayleen says, I feel whiplash, like the interview study was for nothing. Am I correct that observation would have generated more actionable data for creating the design system? I don't know. I mean, I always love observational research over anything else, but observational research for creating a design system?
So really, I saw the other comment that she made about the usability test and how to implement them. Honestly, Kayleen, I'm getting a bit of a feeling like and I'm not making any, this is just my intuition. I'm making assumptions, but that it feels like they're trying to figure out a way to enable the developers so they don't have to talk to the designers, right? So if they know what design system piece to use for what thing, to address that at scale and not have to interact with the designers in the first place. This is something that has certainly been, and is something I've dealt with in the past and I experienced with. But in a design system, first and foremost, is never a replacement for a designer. So first and foremost, that's a blanket statement. And second, there's so much missing data. It feels like you're trying to, my combo board question is up there somewhere. I think you're two different tracks, right? Design system. Okay. We need to create reusable components that are appropriate for the overall larger problem we're solving. That's track A. Track B is, okay, how do we leverage those components in innovative and interesting ways to solve particular problems for those different, I forget what we call them, nonprofit strategies or something you call them, right? So they're two completely separate tracks. So to your point, Debbie, I'm confused about how they overlap in that way.
Okay, fair enough. Then we are going to continue because we got a very long question in anonymously. Get your pen and paper handy, everybody. This is a long one, and it says, I'd like to try a research-focused approach on this next project. Context, a project with a startup, online school. The business bottom line is get more clients. Secondary is client retention. I feel like this overlaps with marketing a lot. I'm trying to think through how to approach this project. For example, the client wants more clients and students for business. My thoughts are, what is the problem? Are customers dropping off on some part of the journey, website homepage? My approach to find out could be audit, heuristic evaluation, customer journey map. Is the message not aligning with prospective clients' true pain points? My approach to find out could be conduct user interviews to find better alignment between the users and the business so that their true pain points are being solved. Are my thoughts on the right track? If this sounds jumbled, I'll do my best to clarify. Thank you so much. Okay, there was a lot in there, and I think there's a lot for us to comment on. And then I might have to, let's see, what questions are after that? Let me just check. We've got one question after that, so I think I'm going to have to say no more questions today. I get the feeling by the time we get through this one and the next one, we might just be out of time. So, Matthew, what do you make of this story?
Yeah. So thanks for taking the time to write all that out. First of all, my initial reaction is that there's kind of two layers to this. The first and foremost is that business goals are not user goals. And if you're trying to align them, that's never going to happen. They should and almost always are in conflict with each other, right? And a lot of what you wrote out there sound like business goals, but what are the user's goals? And then you just enumerate a bunch of like random methods, but that doesn't necessarily help me understand. Okay, yes, it's clear what the business wants, right? They want client retention. Having some semblance of, excuse me, measurable OKRs would be more helpful as far as the business is concerned, right? So that you can actually know whether or not you're successful, like literally, like quantifiably, or quantitatively, or quantifiably, right? Yeah. But then a product or a digital experience is the balancing of those two, right? In some way, again, they're not aligned, they're just somehow being met at the same time, or somehow understood of how helping one will help the other, right? And I think you have to figure out a way to balance those. And in my expectation or my experience, based on what you've written here, yeah, go talk to people. If anything, the fastest thing is to have a half-hour conversation with somebody, because you can ask why. They can connect you with other people that you might be able to speak with. There is a wealth of information that you can learn, and it's much more personable, because at the end of the day, I think we get a bit too caught up on methodologies and technology and forget the fact that there's human beings that use these at the end of the day, that have lives and things that they're doing, kids that they got to pick up from practice, all this kind of stuff, right? So um, try to do as much as you can to put the human in front of you, and put a face to a name, and put a face to a user. And so go talk to them, understand what are the things that they're talking about, make sure that you're talking to a few different people in different regions to avoid unconscious bias and make a product for everybody. But ultimately, at the end of the day, recognize that business goals are not user goals, and they're always going to be conflicting. So that's my piece.
Yeah, I loved it. Excellent answer. Thank you for that, and certainly agree. So sure, the business wants more customers, more clients, more money. We get it. But what's going on with the users? And I would probably look at a research study that studied two general buckets of people. One would be the people who've been to our website before and have or haven't converted to become students. I think you said this was an online school. And the other would be people who we can find through outside recruiting who might want to learn whatever this teaches, but aren't our students and haven't been to our website before. And we could just learn more about behaviors and decision making. How do you find online schools that teach this? Are you going to one now? How did you select it? What were your criteria? What was important and not important to you? Larry says your interviews should be solution agnostic. Otherwise, you end up incrementally improving the current design and not identifying the true problem. Yeah, totally agree there for sure. You can easily accidentally end up doing little incremental changes to the website or the content or this paragraph or this stock photo, but have you really understood the priorities and needs and tasks of people who want to find this type of school and attend this type of school? So I think that I would embark on some sort of semi-observational, semi-interview research, have people share their screens and learn how do you find the schools that you've checked out? How did you pick the one that you picked? What do you like about it? What could be improved? And you'll learn, I think, a lot more generally about the students' needs, perceptions, behaviors, tasks, priorities, and that would hypothetically guide better content, better website, and maybe even a better school.
Yeah, as somebody from a family of teachers, I was going to go the other way. I wouldn't think of conversion of people signing up, because people could sign up, but how many people are actually graduating, right? Like that would be
Ooh.
my measurement of success in the business, right? Yeah, people are signing up, but are they actually attending, for as long as they need to, and then ultimately graduating, or are they coming for a year and just dropping off? And that would ultimately be product experience. Do they feel like the material they're getting is valuable, et cetera, right?
Right. So you have the attraction and you have the retention. Are we getting the
Right.
clients and are we keeping the clients through that graduation? And then what are they doing after they graduate? Are they pleased with their school experience? Are they negative about the school experience and things like that? Some people would measure it with an NPS, but I would still want to interview people and learn more about the details. Um,
Yeah,
Sorry, Roshan, we
for
might
sure.
run out of time today. We've got 5 minutes and one more question, so I'm gonna have to push you
Let's
off to
go.
next week. Last question. Thanks everybody for your patience today, and for Matt for taking rapid fire, random unknown questions that even I did not know were coming.
Not
Um,
good.
Okay, so this question says, and I'll need to bump up the font a bit. It is too small. In a consulting company setting, during project scoping and estimation, where UX provides estimations alongside other disciplines, what are some powerful arguments to justify the time it takes to conduct exploratory user research on the problem space? Debbie mentions business risk mitigation, which I find very useful. I wonder if there are other arguments specific to problem space that can be used in such settings. Matthew, how would you fight for the UX time?
So this is interesting. The use, particularly the use of the vernacular arguments. I mean, first and foremost, I don't see it as an argument, right? It's a conversation, it's a collaboration, right? So first and foremost, I think having that like that feeling like you don't need to be so Roy Kent about it when you walk into a meeting with these people. If
Roy
I'm the
Kent?
somebody who's been watching Ted Lasso, yeah, like Roy Kent.
Yes.
Maybe come in a bit more Keely, as it were, right? A bit more like, hey, let's figure out a way for this to work together. And time, money, and scope when you're doing consulting, those are the three axioms you're dealing with, right? And if there is some like, hey, we're trying to do, a fixed budget and we have this much time, be flexible, but understand that the results are going to get are going to be mitigated, as it were, or adjusted in some way, right? So, okay, we only want to allow 2 weeks of research. Okay, great, that's totally fine, but that means that the scope that we're going to deliver is going to be about half, right? Like be adjustable and flexible in that way to say that's fine, but set expectations about what they don't just think that, okay, I'm going to do the same amount of work in half the amount of time. That's not realistic for any job, right? Why would it be okay for ours? And plus, you want to obviously maintain some semblance of a work-life balance in that situation. So it's just about adjusting, like, okay, that's fine, but here's the adjusted scope and what you're going to get out of it. And if that's not okay, then give me more time. So it's kind of, you're putting it back on them to make the decision of what's more important.
Yeah, totally agree. And the way that I've been phrasing it is more like, and you have to find a more gentle way to say it than how I'm about to say it. But hey, are you looking for world-class UX work? Are you looking for the best work that I can produce? And if you're not looking for the best work that I can produce, can I please put that in the risk register? Because it's a risk that I'm not going to be given the time or resources or headcount or whatever to do my best work, and that you're going to settle for a mediocre version of my work. So I think we have to find a gentle way to talk about those risks. But again, you ultimately, the amount of time they give you is the amount of time they give you. We can certainly push back against that. But I like what Matthew is saying with respect to, we're just going to have to let them know that if you only give me 3 days for design, here's what we're going to be missing. We're not going to be able to do these rounds of testing. We're not going to be able to iterate if I only get 3 days for design. You might think that's good enough, but what are the risks if it's not good enough for our customer? And what are the risks if we have to come back later and delay another project to fix this? So I think you have to kind of raise some of those warning flags in the friendliest way possible. Matthew, something to add?
Yeah, Yeah, I was gonna say two things to that. Yeah, to that point, and it might be frustrating for you, and that certainly can be for me and anyone else. They're the ones paying the bills. So at the end of the day, if they're willing to accept those risks, then that's on them. Make sure you document it in some way, or it's reflected in the OKRs or whatever. Or if you want to be more literal about it, I did remember that that GIF of, or is it, maybe it's a video of the person drawing the same drawing, but the first one they do in 10 seconds, the second one they do in 1 minute, and the third one they do in 10 minutes.
Right.
And it shows the fidelity difference there. That's also, like, if you want to show like a literal example for maybe presentations, you can throw that in there. And that's also a good example of like, look, just give me a little bit more time. Look how much greater the results are. Through two, if you really want to go for it, you can reference things like the McKinsey article that says that for every dollar invested in user experience, there's a 10-fold return. I think the closest is maybe development with a 3-fold return. So just trying to explain what the values of what you're doing can be to the business will ultimately help you. But at the end of the day, you have to accept that just might not be enough, and they're the business, and they cut the bills, and they might not want to do it, and they're okay with that risk, and they're going to go forward, and you just try to help them the best that you can.
Yeah, and I think another thing might be reminding people that the customer experience is the brand experience, and that if we release something that isn't a great match to users or customers' needs, we run the risk that there are negative brand perception repercussions, that people are angrily tweeting, that support gets slammed, that stock price, something. I mean, we all saw earlier this year, a couple of companies had their stock prices go pretty wild when people responded to things that they perceived as poor customer experiences. So, depending upon what's going on, you may or may not trot that one out. Larry says, do you have time to do some guerrilla usability testing to illustrate the difference between a usable design and an unusable one? Probably not if this is just scoping and estimating time. It sounds like that needs to happen efficiently without, hey, I've got a little side project I need to do. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Like, what are you even usability testing? Like, if you haven't even spent the time to understand the problem, go through an actual real sprint and create designs and then test them. Like, I don't know what you're testing because you haven't even designed anything yet. So I'm not entirely sure what you're testing at that point. Right.
Yeah, and another thing that I like to do sometimes is I say to people, well, like, look, I know sometimes we feel like our users will just figure it out and they'll have to suffer with it until we fix it, and we'll fix it later. But tell me about a time when you went to a website and it didn't work the way you needed it to work, and you couldn't figure it out, and you didn't want to call support, and now you've never done business with that company again. We have to remember that not everybody just figures it out. Not everybody contacts support. Not everybody invests time in trying to make this work. Sometimes we just lose customers, and as Matthew said earlier, are we okay with that risk?
Yeah, to follow really quick on that one, I saw something going around LinkedIn where someone was suggesting that once a year, every CEO of a company should try to use their application system to apply for a job, just to see what the experience is like. And at the end of the day, yes, it's funny for all of us, but what they're really trying to do is, hey, have some empathy. It's like the show. Undercover Boss, right, where they put these people who are always in corner offices and put them into where they're the people who they pay every day work. They're really just building empathy, and they're really just caring and having some sort of radical compassion about the people who work really hard for them. So at the end of the day, if you can get them to do that, and it takes everything from just telling them right through those articles, which I think somebody posted about, through to I've literally taken very high level executives and I did like a mock interview with them because I wanted them to literally experience what it was like. And most of the time I got halfway through, like, yep, that's fine. I don't care. Talk to whoever you want to. Right. So it's really about getting them to build empathy about what we're trying to do and ultimately what value we bring.
I cannot keep up with how much you say empathy. Okay, we're out of time. Roshan's question will be first next week, where I'm hoping we will have special guest Dr. Giles Morrison joining us. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us this week. And to remind everybody where we can find you, follow you, appropriately stalk you.
Yeah. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. If you'd like to connect, please leave a note. Otherwise, be sure to check out my podcast, Discovering Design, available on Apple Podcasts and all other major podcast platforms. And check out season 3 and all female but one cast or one member this season, coming up in season 3 this May. So be sure to check that out as well.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks to everybody who joined in and sent questions. And Matthew, thanks again for being such a good sport. I'm going to play us out of here. There's no show tomorrow, so I will see everybody on Friday for Critical Thinking Reaction Stream. If you'd like to send something in for me to review, send it to deltacx.com/links. Hopefully by then, I'll have my lighting worked out. Thanks to everybody. Have a good day and be safe. Bye. Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are